Tonight, the stock market plummeting as President Trump's trade war escalates even further. The S&P 500 sinking into correction territory, meaning it's taken a major hit in just 1 month. President Trump threatening to slap a 200% tariff on alcohol imports from Europe, impacting wine, champagne, even your favorite beers. What it all means for your wallet. Also tonight, storming Trump Tower. Nearly 100 protesters arrested after staging a sit-in after a Palestinian activist was detained by ICE. The chaotic moments inside the president's New York building. Russian President Vladimir Putin signaling openness to a ceasefire with Ukraine. What he says must happen before Russia agrees to a pause in fighting. Los Angeles hit by a rare tornado. The dramatic video as the twister rips trees from their roots. Cars trapped in a mudslide as that powerful atmospheric river moves inland, where severe storms are headed next. The Connecticut stepmom under arrest after she allegedly held her stepson captive for decades. That grown man weighing only 69 pounds. We speak with the stepmom's lawyer live about the horrific accusations. An influencer in the wild, the creator facing backlash after she filmed herself snatching a baby wombat from its mother. Plus, the controversies swirling around Disney's remake of Snow White. Top Story starts right now. Good evening. I'm Ellison Barber in for Tom Llamas. Tonight, chaos on Wall Street as President Trump threatens new tariffs, sending stocks tumbling once again. The growing economic uncertainty leaving investors on edge. Take a look. The Dow ending sharply lower, falling 537 points. The S&P 500 closing at 5521, entering correction territory by dropping more than 10% from its record high in February. The Nasdaq, that's also down. It comes as the tit-for-tat transatlantic trade war escalates, with the European Union threatening a 50% tariff on Kentucky bourbon and American motorcycles, including Harley-Davidson. President Trump hitting back, saying if the EU goes forward, he will slap a 200% tariff on alcohol from Europe. These are just some of the most popular liquors, beers, wines, and champagnes that could cost you a whole lot more. So what exactly can you expect? Right now, a six-pack of Heineken costs around $8.99. If Trump's tariffs take effect and the full increase is passed on to customers, you could pay nearly $27 for that same six-pack. For more on the latest on the markets, let's turn now to NBC's senior business correspondent, Christine Romans. Okay, Christine, help us understand what correction territory means, and is it really that rare for a major index to enter into it?
It's 10%, as you said, from a recent high to where it is, so that's a swift move. This one has happened in just 19 days. It's rare to be so swift. The last time we had a correction was in 2023. Before that, it was in 2020. And I'm going to give you a stat from Bloomberg, Ellison, I think you're going to appreciate. From the high to this correction down 10% took just 19 days. That's the seventh fastest going back to the Great Depression. 3 of the fastest corrections happened under Donald Trump, 2018, 2020, and again today.
Donald Trump did promise on the campaign trail throughout his campaign for president this time around that he would do this. He talked a lot about tariffs. Why is it that investors are seemingly so surprised that he actually did it?
Because he also talked about deregulation and tax cuts. And those 3 things together, investors thought at least 2/3 of that agenda would be good for business. But he's really just focusing, in their view, on the tariffs. And they've been announcing tariffs pausing, and then enacting tariffs and then carve-outs, and then enacting tariffs and pausing again. And then there's a reaction from Europe, and then he has another reaction, the 200% on champagne and the like. And so it's just this back and forth that is signaling chaos in the strategy. And his strategy, of course, is to get America to build all the stuff here and to end fentanyl. 2 prongs, I think. But the markets are saying, wait a minute, this is going to hurt in the near term. It's going to take a very long time.
What should people do if they are just your average standard day-to-day investor? Because it's daunting seeing those numbers again and again. Is the move here to just not look at it and leave it if you're just the average person, or should we be doing something?
I never like to try to find my login to the 401k when there's chaos, but a lot of you probably are. Look, for some perspective, if you have a part of your stock portfolio, your 401k that's $150,000, you're going to see that $15,000 of that has been lost roughly. If you're looking at that part of it, it's why you always want to make sure that you have a mix of things, a diversified, as they say, retirement account. I always say when stocks go down, you're buying them cheaper. Over time, the market is up a lot. It's really up like 360% over the past decade, I think. So, you've had a pretty good run here overall. When there are pullbacks, just be patient. Be patient. We don't know if this one is just the beginning or this is the end of the pullback. It's anybody's guess, really.
All right. Christine Romans, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Despite the market reaction, President Trump is pressing on with his tariff policies, vowing to impose, as we just discussed, that 200% duties on European alcohol if the EU does not drop new 50% tariffs on American whiskey. It comes as Secretary of State Marco Rubio visits Canada amid that country's trade war with the U.S. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez is on the ground in Quebec with reaction from Canadians who are getting angrier by the day.
Tonight, President Trump showing no signs of backing off his new tariff threat.
We've been ripped off for years, and we're not going to be ripped off anymore. No, I'm not going to bend at all.
The president calling the European Union hostile and abusive as he threatens 200% tariffs on European alcohol coming into the U.S. if Europe does not drop their new 50% levy on American whiskey.
We sell no cars to Europe. I mean, virtually no cars. And they sell millions of cars to us. It's like a one-way street with them. The European Union is very, very nasty.
All after the president Wednesday slapped 25% tariffs on imported steel and aluminum.
The president was totally annoyed that the Europeans did this, and so you're going to hear back from someone who emotionally cares about America.
Publicly, the administration projecting confidence, touting lower inflation, and both egg and gas prices coming down. But privately, NBC News has learned the stock market slide has Republicans concerned. Two people familiar with the discussion say officials at the White House's National Economic Council have indicated fears it could be difficult to rebound quickly from a downturn. Though in South Carolina, steel producer David Zalesny says Trump's tariffs are critical to saving American jobs.
You've seen a tremendous amount of fabricated structural steel coming across the border from Canada and really decimating and wiping out a lot of the domestic industry.
Today, President Trump mocking Canada again.
Canada only works as a state. It doesn't. We don't need anything they have. Keeping "O Canada," the national anthem. I love it. I think it's great. Keep it. But it'll be for the state, one of our greatest states.
That did not go over well here in Canada today.
Mr. Rubio, is it appropriate
where Secretary of State Marco Rubio took no questions from reporters at a G7 meeting. Social media erupting with calls to buy Canadian and boycott USA.
This is my last bag of American product.
The outrage rippling across Hamilton, Canada, home to major steel companies.
Total insanity. I don't know what Trump is doing, but hopefully there's some plan behind his madness.
Americans need to feel pain. We can't just roll over and experience all the pain ourselves.
And Gabe joins us now from Quebec. Gabe, you mentioned the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, there declining to answer questions from reporters after the G7 meeting. Do we know what more came out of those talks?
Well, Ellison, we don't know exactly how those talks went because we haven't received a readout out of any of them. But Secretary Rubio is in the building behind me preparing for a dinner that's about to get started tonight. But there's still a lot of questions about what happens next here. Look, this summit, this meeting, the tops of the agenda was supposed to be the war in Ukraine, China, the Indo-Pacific. But what has been looming large over all of this is this tariff turmoil with the Canadian foreign minister promising to really push the point to Secretary Rubio. And of course, this all comes, Allison, as some Canadian officials actually went down to Washington today to meet with the U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. So this meeting continues tomorrow. Again, Secretary Rubio has not taken any questions yet from reporters. Allison.
Gabe Gutierrez in Canada. Thank you. Next tonight, the nearly 100 arrests made today at Trump Tower here in Midtown Manhattan after pro-Palestinian protesters stormed into the building demanding the release of a Columbia University graduate and activist who is facing deportation. And late today, the university announcing some of the students who took over buildings as part of campus protests last year will be expelled. NBC's Laura Jarrett has this report.
Protesters flooding the lobby inside Trump Tower in Manhattan today, outraged over the government's continued detention of Mahmoud Halil. The demonstration led by the group Jewish Voice for Peace demanding the release of the 30-year-old grad student who became one of the faces of the protests against Israel at Columbia University last spring and now faces possible deportation. Police placing demonstrators in zip ties, escorting them up the iconic golden escalator after they staged a sit-in for more than an hour, ultimately arresting 98 people, leading them away in a police van and city bus.
Those arrested are for trespassing, obstructing governmental administration, and resisting arrest.
The outcry in New York and beyond, a response to immigration agents arresting Khalil, a permanent U.S. resident, on Saturday, before then flying him to Louisiana, where he remains in a detention facility tonight. The Trump administration invoking a rarely used provision of immigration law in order to deport him, deeming him a threat to U.S. interests for supporting Hamas, which his lawyers deny, saying he's been charged with no crime and they've seen no evidence against him.
I think he's angry. I think he's confused and scared.
His deportation on hold for now as the Trump administration continues the fight in court.
And Laura joins us now in studio. Laura, there have been some new developments in this case with Khalil and other students from Columbia University asking a federal government to step in. Explain to us what's going on there.
Yeah, they're pushing back now on the idea that Columbia would fork over their records to the House committee that's been investigating how Jewish students are treated on campus. Obviously, a hot topic right now, the Trump administration taking that on, as we know, pulling funding from Columbia University, threatening others. So they're trying to make sure that Columbia doesn't fork over those records, saying there's tons of privacy issues involved.
Okay. And before you go, we have to also ask you about news coming from the White House tied to the Supreme Court. President Trump taking his fight over birthright citizenship to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, this is one of the most hotly contested executive orders so far in his administration, now going all the way to the Supreme Court that will have the final say. We don't yet know whether the justices are going to take this up. And we should mention the appeal here, very narrow, not about necessarily the entire ability for the president to be able to do this, but just about whether these injunctions that are currently in place should be nationwide or should they be more limited to the states that have sued. Allison.
Laura Jarrett, thank you. We also have breaking news tonight on Capitol Hill and that looming government shutdown now just hours away. One day after Senate Democrats said they would oppose a GOP spending bill to keep the government open, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer taking to the floor of the chamber arguing they should allow it to pass. Take a listen.
While the CR bill is very bad, the potential for a shutdown has consequences for America that are much, much worse. I believe it is my job to make the best choice for the country to minimize the harms to the American people. Therefore, I will vote to keep the government open and not shut it down.
So what does this mean for the fight to avert a shutdown? Let's get right to NBC News Chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles, who joins us now live. Ryan, now that Schumer has publicly said he will vote to allow this bill to pass, where do those other Democratic holdouts stand as of now? Are we still looking at a shutdown?
This is a strong signal, Allison, that a shutdown will likely not happen. Schumer carries an enormous amount of sway over his Senate Democratic colleagues, and it looks as though he is trying to find a process here whereby the bill can come to the floor without the added need of a supermajority of votes, meaning it would take 60 votes to pass. Instead, it would be a simple majority, which would allow his entire caucus to vote no, but then allow Republicans to have enough votes to pass the measure and then ultimately avert a shutdown. Now, in order to get to that stage, though, there will need to be at least 8 Democrats that decide that they will allow the opportunity to eliminate that 60-vote threshold. That's still an open question right now, but the fact that Schumer was willing to go to the floor and declare this his position means it is likely there are enough Democratic votes to move this to the final stage and that there is a very real possibility the shutdown will be avoided. Allison.
Ryan, do we know why Schumer decided to take that position? I mean, walk us through the behind the scenes of what changed here, because it was a day ago that Democrats were saying they did not want this bill.
Yeah, it's a great question, Allison. And this has been a question that Democrats have wrestled with for the past 24 hours. And many Democrats within the Senate Democratic caucus were very much opposed to taking this path. They felt that this was their opportunity to stand up to the Trump administration, vote against a package that they really do not like. They do not believe that this short-term spending bill solves many of the country's problems, and they believe that it will be problematic once implemented into law. But they were also dealing on the other end of this equation, the possibility of a very damaging government shutdown. And Democrats have long been against shutdown politics. They are very much opposed to using the shutdown as a political weapon. And when making this tough decision between what they really believe to be two bad outcomes, they determined, at least Senator Schumer and some of his other colleagues have determined, that the shutdown option would be far worse, and it would also give Donald Trump another weapon in his messaging war against Democrats, essentially beating them over the head with the fact that they moved to shut down the government. Now, this is not going to be a popular decision with the base of the Democratic Party. Let's be very clear, Allison. There were many Democrats that were encouraging Democrats to hold the line, the Senate Democrats to hold the line, and they were willing to take whatever consequences would come from a government shutdown to prove this political point. But tonight, Chuck Schumer deciding that's just not worth the risk, and this is the path that he has chosen to take. Allison.
Ryan Nobles on the Hill. Thank you. Overseas in Russia tonight, President Vladimir Putin weighing in for the first time on that possible ceasefire deal with Ukraine, saying he is open to the U.S. proposal, but will demand some changes. NBC's chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel is in Ukraine with more.
In his first comments on President Trump's 30-day ceasefire proposal, which was already accepted by Ukraine, Russia's President Putin tonight said he's in favor of the idea, then gave several reasons why he's not agreeing to it for now. The idea itself is right, and we absolutely support it, but there are questions we should discuss, he said, suggesting he'll call President Trump directly. President Putin went on to say a military pause would give Ukraine time to regroup and rearm while Russian forces are making gains on the battlefield, especially in the Russian province of Kursk, where Putin just visited, donning fatigues and speaking of victory and new buffer zones.
Well, we'd like to see a ceasefire from Russia.
Still, President Trump described Putin's comments tonight as encouraging.
He put out a very promising statement, but it wasn't complete. Now we're going to see whether or not Russia's there, and if they're not, it'll be a very disappointing moment for the world.
On the front lines in Ukraine, troops aren't putting down the guns yet. They doubt Putin is seriously considering ending the war.
This soldier is scanning the sky for Russian drones. Even with all this talk of a ceasefire, soldiers out here say they're seeing no let-up in Russian attacks.
They say it's time to give peace a chance.
Everyone is waiting to see if Putin will also agree. What do you expect?
Russia's commitments, this soldier said, are not worth the paper they are printed on.
President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, is in Moscow tonight pushing the ceasefire deal. Here in Ukraine, President Zelensky called Putin's comments predictable and manipulative. Ellison.
Richard Engel, thank you. Turning now to the weather and the dangerous storm slamming Southern California today. The system bringing heavy rains, mudslides, and even causing a rare tornado. And that storm is now marching east. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson reports from Los Angeles.
Pounding rain, carried by howling winds, slamming into Southern California overnight. The late-season winter storm blasting neighborhoods, spewing dangerous debris from hillsides. In Orange County, swiftwater rescue teams airlifting a victim to safety after this SUV tumbled into a creek. Near Palm Springs, rescue teams pulling out 6 people after their cars were caught in mudslides. Thankfully, all were saved, treated, and released without injury. The storm even spawning an unusual LA County tornado.
The final damage assessment rating for this confirmed tornado is an EF0.
The National Weather Service confirming the small twister touched down in Pico Rivera, just south of LA, producing winds topping 85 miles per hour, toppling trees. Thankfully, nobody hurt, but neighbors forced to run for cover.
I was running for my life. Yeah, I just got up, told my wife, get up, get the kids, and went to the back.
Tonight, 21 million under flood alerts across the state. The storm now moving east, turning its wrath to the rest of the country, rattling nerves in this already vulnerable, fire-scarred region, leaving a mess in its wake. Steve Patterson, NBC News.
That storm system now on the move. Let's bring in NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns for more. I mean, Bill, what else should people be expecting from this severe weather outbreak?
A lot of danger, a significant number of tornadoes, possibly an outbreak, and maybe even strong tornadoes. So this time tomorrow, we expect those tornadoes and the strong thunderstorms to be through areas of Iowa and also through Missouri, heading towards St. Louis, and then overnight towards Peoria, Chicago, Memphis, southwards. Not only tornadoes, we may even get some strong, what we call EF2 or stronger tornadoes anywhere in the hash line. So pretty much all along the Mississippi River, southwards down towards Mississippi. Then on Saturday, we're going to do it all over again. This time, the storms will be coming off the Gulf. We'll see them into Louisiana. Watch out, my friends, in Mississippi, also in Alabama. And eventually, those storms will be traveling up towards Atlanta. By the time we get to Sunday, not tornadoes so much, but we will be watching very strong winds with thunderstorms rolling across the East Coast. And if that wasn't enough, the fire danger tomorrow is extreme. We are going to see winds 60 to 80 mile per hour gusts. Everything is still bone dry in the middle of the country. If any fires start tomorrow, Ellison, watch out. I mean, look at these predicted wind gusts. The winds alone are going to cause damage.
Wow. Bill, I know there's also a total lunar eclipse tonight. A lot of people excited about that. How is the forecast looking for that?
I mean, the forecast in many areas looks great, but you have to be a night owl. I mean, this is happening starting at 1 a.m. on the East Coast, and the whole thing is going to take about 4 hours. So if it's a middle of the night thing, and it will look at a reddish hue to it as it goes into totality. That'll begin at 2:26 a.m. on the East Coast. Again, it'll last about 90 minutes. The whole thing's over with by about 4:30 in the morning on the East Coast. And the best areas for clear skies, the Midwest looks great. Great Lakes looks just fine. Ohio Valley looks pretty good, too, and not bad in the Mid-Atlantic. So if you're a night owl, Allison, it'll be quite a show, but it is the middle of the night.
I am looking forward to seeing the photos night owls get of that. Bill Cairns, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Heading overseas now to Italy, where Naples was rocked by a 4.4 magnitude earthquake. That's the strongest to hit that city in decades. Some residents even sleeping outside, fearing aftershocks would cause their homes to crumble. Here's a look at those panicked moments and the damage left behind. The most powerful earthquake to hit Naples, Italy in 40 years, violently shaking residents awake. The 4.4 magnitude quake rocking light fixtures in cafes as sleepy parents rushed through their homes, grabbing their young children, trying to get them to safety. This home's ceiling collapsed, dumping heaps of rubble onto the floor. Some people deciding to spend the rest of the night outside or huddled in their cars for fear of aftershocks. 11 people were sent to the hospital. I was sleeping and suddenly I heard a terrible bang. I had never heard one so loud, this man says. I turned on the lights and saw that my house is full of cracks. This man says he heard people screaming, running down from the buildings, and saw others climbing down from their balconies out of desperation. As the sun rose, the scale of damage became more apparent. Emergency responders continuing to check on people, also rushing to inspect the integrity of buildings that are centuries old. Tremors are not unheard of here. This city sits amid a swath of ancient volcanoes that on good days help to draw 20 million visitors to the region every year. But scientists with Italy's Civil Protection Department say a dormant volcano near the quake's epicenter is slowly pushing much of the region's ground upward and causing more frequent seismic activity. As residents begin cleanup from this quake, many worry with the shifting ground that it will not be long until the next one. And so far, there have been no major aftershocks. We're back in a moment with the new house of horrors. A woman accused of keeping her stepson captive inside for decades. Police say the man in his 30s only weighed 69 pounds. Her lawyer joins us live why he says she is innocent. Plus, the healthcare executive targeted by a suspected arsonist. Was the attack inspired by Luigi Mangione? And the heart-stopping video, a snowboarder barely outrunning an avalanche. How he survived, next on Top Story. Back now with the horrific accusations against a Connecticut stepmom. Police say Kimberly Sullivan allegedly held her 32-year-old stepson captive for decades. Authorities describe the man's living conditions as worse than a jail cell. That victim telling police he started a fire as his way to escape. NBC's Aaron McLaughlin has the details.
Tonight, 56-year-old Kimberly Sullivan is charged with felony assault and kidnapping of her 32-year-old stepson.
It's truly a horrifying, and it's beyond comprehension what occurred here.
Police allege Sullivan held her stepson captive inside this Connecticut home for 2 decades, locking him inside his room for more than 20 hours a day with little food, water, or medical attention.
It was worse than the conditions of a jail cell.
Police are not naming the alleged victim, who they say set fire to his home last month using a lighter, hand sanitizer, and paper because he wanted his freedom. According to the affidavit, which also says when firefighters arrived, Sullivan was outside. The man found inside, suffering from smoke inhalation, standing at 5'9" tall and weighing 69 pounds. Adding he was extremely emaciated. His hair was matted and unkempt. He was very dirty, and all his teeth appeared to be rotten. Sullivan denies the allegations. Her attorney telling NBC News she intends to plead not guilty. While the victim's former principal says his school sounded the alarm decades ago.
We knew it. We reported it. Not a damn thing was done. That's the tragedy of the whole thing.
Tonight, police acknowledge a wellness check was performed back in 2005, but they say they found nothing wrong. His former principal says the boy was pulled from school and never seen again.
The young man's unimaginable suffering over the course of 2 decades is just a reminder of the darkness that does exist in our world.
Aaron McLaughlin, NBC News.
For more on this case, we are joined now by the attorney for Kimberly Sullivan, Llamas. Llamas, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I know you were in court today with your client. She faces charges of assault, kidnapping, unlawful restraint, cruelty to persons, and reckless endangerment. Is your position still that she is innocent of all of the charges against her?
Absolutely.
How come?
My client denies that she's done anything wrong. When we reviewed these allegations with her, she was shocked to hear the claims that have been made. She denies ever locking them in a room. She denies the restraint that was claimed. She denies just about everything that's in the arrest warrant.
Let me ask you, because the alleged victim here, her stepson, is currently 5'9" and 68.7 pounds. According to the affidavit, medical staff treating him told police that he is near starvation. He's 32 years old. How do you explain a 5'9", 32-year-old man only weighing 69 pounds?
So that's a good question, but that's not one that we're going to answer today, and that's not one that the defense is obligated to answer.
Okay, well, let me...
First off, there's a lot of information that we still don't have. We were provided with the warrant shortly before the arraignment, which is typical. We had a short period of time to discuss what specific allegations were being made, about 20 minutes with our client before the arraignment. So we've had very little time to deal with these specific allegations that have been made. With respect to his condition, we have yet to see any medical records. We have yet to see any records of any kind. So I think it's premature to discuss that. And just from an overall standpoint, there's almost an expectation that the defense must explain away every allegation that has been made. And I push back on that. Ultimately, these are just allegations at this point. And these are allegations that must be proven by the state, because the state's going to carry a very heavy burden at trial. So the burden is going to be on them to prove the allegations that they have made. We will respond to certain things at the appropriate time once we have all the information.
Given that, I do want to ask you about some other information that we have. And I understand that you're right. This is ultimately something that has to be proven by the state. The burden is on them, not you. But in the affidavit, police cite having photographic evidence as well as removing a door from the room where they say he was being held. And in part, they write this on the door jamb. It appeared that you could see holes from previous locks that were utilized in the past. You could also see the locks that were currently on it were functional and clearly meant to keep someone in, not someone out of the room. The affidavit, which I have here, goes on to say you could also see that there was plywood attached to each side of the door, not only to reinforce it, but to prevent any tampering of the outer locks. Why would there be any reason? Has your client told you why she would have those sorts of markings or why she would have put plywood only on this door in her home?
So we have yet to see any actual evidence with respect to that. I do understand that there may have been plywood, as is alleged in the warrant. At the appropriate time, we will discuss that with my client. We do anticipate an explanation regarding the locks being, or the latch being on the door. There will be an explanation for that, and it's going to be more appropriate for us to share that in court once we've gotten all the information. Now, just because there is a latch doesn't mean that it was used, doesn't mean that it was used daily, doesn't mean that it was used recently. The state still has the burden of proving that the door was actually locked and someone was actually locked in. A latch on a door means nothing.
What has your client said about her stepson and his condition? I mean, he's in the hospital, very sick. They describe it as him having wasting syndrome. Is she worried about his health?
Of course she is. Of course she's concerned for his well-being.
I also wanted to ask you, I'd seen outside of the courthouse, you spoke to reporters, and at one point you said that the biological father, who has passed away some years before, I presume, or is my understanding at this point, you said that the biological father dictated how he was to be raised. What did you mean by that?
Well, there's been a lot of insinuation online and in some media reports that my client pulled this child out of school, that my client did not permit this child to have medical care. His father was responsible for his care and dictated what the child would do, whether the child would go to school. My client, we push back on the notion that she removed them from school or that she kept them from anyone. The way the warrant reads, it looks to put it all on her. She was not making those decisions. That I can tell you.
Do you know at this point when his biological father passed away?
January of 2024 is my understanding.
Okay. The implication then would be that she was present for most of the alleged abuse that occurred, he says, starting at age 11, but then it was just him and her for those last few years. Has she said anything about why, if perhaps something had happened to lead to his condition he's in now, why she didn't contact authorities after the biological father passed away if it wasn't her choice to keep him out of school, not take him to medical appointments or things like that that police are alleging have happened here over the years?
So I can't disclose the specifics of my conversation with my client, but I could tell you at the time the father passed away, this gentleman was over 30 years old. She wasn't controlling anything in his life. She continued to maintain the home. She continued to get groceries. She continued to keep the lights on, the heat on, and provide a shelter.
But she wasn't concerned. She wasn't concerned to see her adult stepson suddenly become 69 pounds if she didn't have anything to do with that. Why wouldn't she have contacted authorities or someone for a welfare check on an adult?
So the specifics about what she did or couldn't do, those are all things we are going to address in the court. But from our perspective, as far as the law, we don't believe she broke any laws with respect to what she was obligated to do.
All right. Llamas Kaloidis, thank you so much for your time tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a nice night.
Turning now to the Dominican Republic. It has been more than 1 week since an American student disappeared on spring break in Punta Cana. Dominican Republic police now giving an update on the investigation after Loudoun County Police in Virginia just yesterday confirmed the person of interest in this case. NBC's Jesse Kirsch is there and joins us with the latest. Jesse, what more do we know about the search?
So, Ellison, the search is very much ongoing. We saw teams on the move today and briefly spoke with them and saw some of what they were doing, which we'll get to in a moment. But I want to turn back to what you were just talking about there with the person of interest. As you mentioned, that sheriff's office from Loudoun County, Virginia, where Kunanki is a resident, says that they have identified a person of interest. We've been trying to get some confirmation or denial on this from Dominican authorities for quite some time. And we finally heard earlier today that they say that term, person of interest, which, of course, is common when we cover investigations in the U.S., is not a term that they use in the Dominican Republic. And police here further stressed that at this time, no one is being considered a suspect in this case. So that is the latest in terms of the investigative front. Going back to the search efforts, I want to show some video now, Ellison, that was shared with us by authorities on the ground here. This is drone footage that was taken earlier today during one of the searches, and it speaks to the kind of thing that authorities are looking for, but also the kind of thing that can be a false alarm. So authorities tell us that they were doing a sweep in an area, frankly, miles from where Kunanki was last believed to have been seen. And during that search, according to authorities, they saw something that was suspicious. And so that sent more resources over there. And then they subsequently realized what they were looking at was just a sea turtle. So that is the kind of thing that is going on. That takes you a little bit behind the scenes in terms of what they're doing in the search effort. And that's just one aspect of it. Of course, we've seen people on the ground, people in the water as well. So this is truly a land, air, and sea kind of effort right now, Ellison.
Jesse, you have been there reporting for several days now. What have you been hearing from people who live there or other spring breakers on vacation?
We've had some people that we've asked about it. I have had some people, when they realize we're journalists, ask us if that's why we're here. So certainly it is something people are aware of. I haven't come across anyone who we've come across on the beaches who wasn't aware of it, to the best of my recollection. And I'm turning around just to see what it looks like right now. Just minutes ago, we had people out here taking photos. So even in the dark, even at night, people coming to the waterfront. And I can tell you, even at that hotel where this young woman had been staying, even as there were several people in camouflage, a canine, choppers going by, a boat on the water, even with all of that activity, there were dozens of people either tanning or in the water enjoying their time at the beach, Ellison.
Jesse Kirsch in the Dominican Republic. Thank you. When we return, the Indiana woman found alive after being trapped for nearly a week in her car. How she got stuck in the first place and the moment she was finally discovered. Stay with us. Back now with Top Stories news feed, starting with a deadly small plane crash in Texas. Officials say the Cessna jet crashed in the woods shortly after taking off from Mesquite Metro Airport. The pilot was the only person on board and did not survive. No homes or other structures were damaged. The FAA and NTSB are now investigating. An Indiana woman rescued after being trapped in her car for 6 days. Newton County officials say the woman drove off the side of the road after falling asleep behind the wheel, landing in an embankment. Her family reporting her missing as she remained trapped. A Good Samaritan eventually spotted the car and called for help. That mother of 3 was later airlifted to a Chicago hospital for treatment and is expected to be okay. A snowboarder triggering an avalanche at a New Hampshire mountain. New video showing the snowboarder going down Tuckerman's Ravine with that avalanche falling fast directly behind him. Experts say freezing temperatures the night before likely caused the snow to fall that much. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, and the snowboarder was able to beat the wall of snow by mere seconds. And a major shakeup in the house of Versace. Donatella Versace announcing she is stepping down as the fashion label's chief creative officer, ending nearly 30-year reign. She will resume a new role of chief brand ambassador. The 69-year-old took over the role in 1997 following the murder of her brother Gianni. She will be replaced by the Miu Miu design director, Dario Vitale. Next tonight, the investigation into possible arson at the New Jersey home of an executive from the pharmaceutical giant Bayer. The incident unfolding as corporate America remains on heightened alert following the murder of the United Healthcare CEO and the arrest of suspect Luigi Mangione. NBC's George Solis has more.
Tonight, multiple agencies, including the FBI, now investigating what authorities are calling a case of suspected arson at a Bayer executive's New Jersey home. Investigators with the Morris County, New Jersey Prosecutor's Office saying the March 4th fire occurred at an occupied residence, but adding there was no significant damage and no reported injuries. Bayer, the pharmaceutical company known for products like aspirin and Aleve, writing in part, the family is safe and unharmed, and that the company is cooperating fully with the investigation. Bayer, also the parent company of Monsanto, whose weed-killing chemical Roundup has been at the center of many lawsuits. Investigators have not named a suspect, and it's not clear if the executive was targeted for their work at Bayer. The case unfolding a little more than 3 months since the ambush killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in Midtown Manhattan.
And the insult, the intelligence of the American people.
The The suspect in the killing, Luigi Mangione, who's since been charged with first-degree murder, among other related charges, remains in jail at a New York City detention facility. Mangione has pled not guilty to all the charges.
The healthcare system is corrupt, and we need to fix it.
Some protesters have hailed Mangione a hero, his legal defense fund receiving its largest donation to date this week, a staggering $36,500.
We're seeing increased targeting for all corporate executives. That's going to be your C-suite, your executive leadership team, and your board of directors.
Chris Pearson is CEO of BlackCloak, which provides private digital security for executives and their families. He says he's received 50% more requests for protection since the end of last year. The threats in some cases reaching beyond just the executives themselves.
It's moved into the families. It's moved into their mothers and fathers. It's moved into their kids being confronted as well.
George Solis joins us now. So, George, do police have any suspects at this time?
Yeah, hey, Allison. Keep in mind the Morris County Prosecutor's Office says that the FBI is now involved in this investigation. The NYPD also have a couple of fire offices that are involved. But at this point, they have no arrests at this time, and they still are unclear if this was targeted or motivated by the fact that this was an executive in any way, shape, or form. But given, obviously, the timeline and just the scope of this, it is a very comprehensive investigation with a lot of moving parts, Allison.
All right. George Solis, thank you. Now to top stories, Global Watch and the violent clashes between protesters and police in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Police deploying water guns, tear gas, and pellets as protesters threw rocks at officers and set fires. Retirees angry over the far-right government's economic policies have been demonstrating in the capital city for weeks now. Unrest escalating when fans of multiple soccer teams joined the protest outside the congressional building. And a study out of Europe warning against children consuming slushies due to health concerns. Researchers say children under 8 years old should not have slushies due to a string of hospitalizations linked to the sweetening and anti-freezing agent glycerol. According to researchers, at least 21 children under the age of 7 were hospitalized between 2018 and 2024. High levels of glycerol can cause shock, low blood sugar, and loss of consciousness. And an American influencer facing calls for deportation after her interaction with wildlife in Australia. The now deleted video posted by nature influencer Sam Jones shows her taking a baby wombat from its distressed mother and then running away. She released it about a minute later. Australian immigration officials are reportedly now reviewing Jones's visa. Finally tonight, it's been 5 years since the world shut down due to the COVID pandemic. It impacted one bar owner and mother of 6 here in New York City, as well as so many others. But for her, a family recipe and a viral blog post helped her make ends meet back then. And now she has a storefront and a fan base dedicated to her Irish soda bread. NBC's Maya Eaglin went to the shop to try them for herself.
It's a true hole in the wall, nestled in New York's East Village.
One for Antonella, one for Isabel.
Customers lining up, sometimes for hours, for a taste of an Irish tradition.
You know, you could smell it in the air walking down the street. There's nothing like it, really.
Mary O sells only 2 things, Irish soda bread scones and Irish soda bread loaves. They both sell out daily.
The most beautiful, glorious, heavenly thing I've ever had in my entire life.
The mastermind behind it all? Mary O'Halloran.
And you're the only one making the actual scones, right?
My hands only. I've had people come and say, oh, why don't you have somebody come in and help you do this, that? It's not going to work. Doesn't work. Scone does not come out the same.
But just 5 years ago, the mother of 6 found herself in the same place as many Americans, forced to close her business, a local pub, because of the pandemic. Her husband, a longshoreman, stuck in Alaska because of COVID restrictions. So in an effort to pay rent, she turned to a family recipe.
Her bar was going under. She couldn't afford the rent. It was COVID. Nobody was allowed in. She was just trying to scrape and survive. So she started selling these scones.
It was not an instant success until a blog post changed her life.
Every time I come to this part of my story, I just start to cry.
Brandon Stanton, who runs the Popular Humans of New York account, sharing Mary's story with his 12 million followers.
I wrote a story on this, and we ended up that night selling $1 million worth of scones. It is one of the greatest stories in the world to me.
Mary was shipping out hundreds of scones a day, enlisting the help of her friends and regular customers to keep up with demand.
The reason Mary is where she is because that scone tastes so dang good. She would have got there without me.
The constant high volume of orders not only helping Mary keep the bar afloat, but allowing her to open this brick and mortar shop.
What's the best way to eat it, though? Am I just going to pick it up?
With your fingers.
Okay. I get it now. I need to give you a hug, Mary.
Now people traveling here from all over the world just to get a taste of Mary's family recipe.
I live in Los Angeles, but they told me, next time you're in town, there's a place we have to go, and it's the best scone you've ever had, and it's the best soda bread, and we're going to go all the way downtown, and they were right. It's incredible.
The best thing about it is I love it. So it's so easy. Like, of course, I'm tired tonight, but I love it, and I love what I get from it with people. So it's easy.
Maya Eaglin, NBC News.
Thanks so much for watching Top Story. For Tom Llamas, I'm Ellison Barber in New York. Stay right there. More news is on the way.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.